The diner was quiet that afternoon. The kind of quiet where you could hear the soft hum of the overhead fan and the occasional clink of a fork against a plate. It wasn't busy, just a few scattered patrons sipping coffee or picking at their meals. At one corner table sat an 8-year-old boy with scruffy hair and hand-me-down clothes 2 sizes too big for him. His name was Ethan, and he had been saving up coins from odd jobs around the neighborhood to buy his mum something special for her birthday. But today, as he fidgeted with the small wad of crumpled bills in his pocket, something else caught his attention. A man sitting alone by the window. The man looked like he carried the weight of the world on his shoulders. He wore an expensive suit, but it hung loosely on him, as if he'd lost weight recently, or hadn't bothered to care about how he looked anymore. His eyes were fixed on the menu, but they weren't really seeing it. Every now and then, he'd glance toward the door, almost expectantly, before dropping his gaze back down. There was a sadness radiating off him, so palpable that even Ethan, who barely understood adult problems, could feel it across the room. Ethan didn't know this man's name yet, nor did he know that the stranger was worth millions, or that beneath the polished exterior lay a heart shattered into pieces over the loss of his daughter. What Ethan did know was that something about the man felt wrong, like he needed help but wouldn't ask for it. And when the waitress approached the man's table, pen poised over her notepad, Ethan noticed how the man hesitated, then shook his head and muttered something under his breath. The waitress nodded sympathetically and walked away, leaving the man staring blankly at the untouched glass of water in front of him. It was strange, Ethan thought. Why would someone come to a restaurant and not order anything? Maybe he forgot his wallet, or maybe he just couldn't afford it. That thought stuck with Ethan, tugging at him like a loose thread he couldn't ignore. He glanced at the money in his pocket, again the money he'd planned to use to surprise his mum. Mand bit his lip. She wouldn't mind waiting a little longer, right? Not if it meant helping someone who really needed it. As Ethan wrestled with his decision, the camera pans wider, giving us a glimpse of the bigger picture. This wasn't just any ordinary day. It was the anniversary of the man's daughter's passing. Her name was Lily, and she had been only 10 years old when a tragic accident took her life. The pain of losing her still lingered fresh in the man's mind, no matter how much time passed. Today, he had come to this diner because it was one of Lily's favorite places. They used to sit together in the very booth he occupied now, laughing over milkshakes and sharing stories about school or friends. Coming here was both comforting and excruciating, a reminder of everything he'd lost. But grief isn't something you can turn off like a switch. It follows you everywhere, whispering cruel reminders in your ear until you can't tell where the silence ends and the sorrow begins. For the man whose name is Daniel, he had tried everything to fill the void. Left behind, therapy, travel, throwing himself into work, but nothing worked. On days like today, all he wanted was to escape, to pretend for just a moment that things were okay. Yet here he was, unable to even muster the energy to order lunch, let alone find peace. Back at Ethan's table, the internal struggle intensified. He clenched the edge of the sticky formica surface, his knuckles turning white. What would Mum say? He whispered to himself. She always taught him to be kind, to look out for others, especially those who seemed lost or lonely. Still, this was a big step. $8 might not seem like much to some people, but to Ethan, it represented weeks of hard work cleaning garages, raking leaves, even helping Mrs. Henderson next door carry groceries. Was it selfish to want to keep it for himself? Or Would giving it away mean more than keeping it ever could? Before he could change his mind, Ethan slid off his chair and made his way to the counter. His sneakers squeaked softly against the tiled floor as he approached the cashier, clutching the crumpled bills tightly in his fist. The woman behind the register raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised to see such a young customer. "Can I help you, sweetie?" she asked kindly, leaning down slightly to meet his eye level. "I want to pay for that man's lunch," Ethan stammered, pointing toward Daniel's table. His cheeks flushed red as the words tumbled out, and he quickly added, "If it's okay." The cashier blinked, taken aback by the unexpected request. "Are you sure, honey? That's very generous of you." When Ethan nodded firmly, she smiled warmly and rang up a simple mealer cheeseburger, fries, and a soda. As she handed him the receipt, she patted his shoulder. "You've got a good heart, kiddo." Heart pounding, Ethan shuffled over to Daniel's table. Up close, the man looked even sadder than Ethan had imagined. His face was pale, his hands trembling slightly as they rested on the table. Taking a deep breath, Ethan cleared his throat. "Excuse me, sir." Daniel looked up, startled, as though he hadn't realized anyone else was there. His brow furrowed in confusion as he studied the boy standing nervously beside him. "Yes, Ethan fumbled for words, suddenly feeling self-conscious. "I paid for your lunch. I hope that's okay." For a long moment, Daniel simply stared at him, uncomprehending. Then, slowly, realization dawned in his eyes, followed by a flicker of emotion Ethan couldn't quite place. Gratitude, shock, something else entirely. Whatever it was, it made Daniel's voice crack slightly as he spoke. You did what? "I paid for your lunch," Ethan repeated, shuffling his feet awkwardly. "I thought maybe you forgot your wallet or something. You looked like you needed it." Daniel blinked rapidly, his throat working as though he were trying to swallow past a lump. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a sleek leather wallet stuffed with cash and cards. "I have money," he said hoarsely. His voice trailed off, and he looked away, blinking again. Ethan tilted his head, curious despite himself. "Then why didn't you order anything?" Daniel hesitated, torn between brushing off the question and opening up to this wide-eyed stranger who somehow saw through his carefully constructed walls. Finally, he sighed and gestured vaguely toward the empty seat across from him. "Sit down, kid. Let me tell you a story." And so, the unlikely pair found themselves seated together at the worn wooden table, surrounded by the faint aroma of fried food and freshly brewed coffee. Outside, the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting golden shadows through the diner windows. Inside, the air buzzed with anticipation for Ethan, eager to learn more about the mysterious man. For Daniel, wrestling with memories he'd buried deep within himself. Neither of them knew it yet, but this chance encounter would change both their lives forever. As Daniel began to speak, his voice low and measured, Ethan listened intently, hanging on to every word. Little did he know, the story Daniel was about to share would unravel secrets far greater than either of them could have anticipated. Secrets that tied them together in ways neither could imagine. But that's a tale for another time for now. The seeds of connection had been planted, and the stage was set for something extraordinary to unfold. Daniel leaned back in his chair, his fingers tracing the edge of the napkin dispenser, as if searching for something solid to hold on to. For a moment, he seemed lost in thought, his gaze distant, almost as if he was seeing another place, another time. Ethan sat across from him, his small hands resting on the table, waiting patiently. The boy's curiosity was evident, but there was also a quiet understanding in his eyes, a wisdom that felt far beyond his years. Finally, Daniel spoke, his voice soft but tinged with pain. Her name was Lily, he began, pausing to swallow, the lump rising in his throat. She loved this diner. Every Saturday morning we'd come here together. She always ordered pancakes with extra syrup, and I'd get the same thing I'm looking at now. He gestured toward the menu, though his eyes remained downcast. It's been 2 years since she passed away, but some days it feels like it happened yesterday. Ethan's heart sank. He hadn't expected this. Sure, he'd sensed the man's sadness, but hearing about his daughter made everything click into place. It wasn't just grief Daniel carried, it was love, too. A love so immense that losing it had left him hollow. Ethan shifted uncomfortably in his seat, unsure of what to say. What could you possibly say to someone who had lost a piece of their soul? I'm sorry, Ethan murmured finally, his voice barely above a whisper. About your daughter. That must hurt a lot. Daniel nodded slowly, his jaw tightening as he fought back tears. It does, he admitted, more than you can imagine. Money doesn't fix anything, you know. People think being rich makes life easier, but it doesn't bring her back. Nothing does. He paused, glancing at Ethan with a mixture of surprise and gratitude. But today, for the first time in a long while, someone noticed. Someone cared enough to do something kind without expecting anything in return. You reminded me that the world isn't completely broken yet. The words hung heavy between them, filling the space with both warmth and sorrow. Ethan didn't fully understand all of it, how money couldn't heal wounds, or why someone as successful as Daniel still felt so empty, but he understood kindness. Kindness was universal, something everyone could give, no matter how much or how little they had. As the conversation unfolded, Daniel found himself opening up in ways he hadn't done in years. He told Ethan about Lily's laugh, her favorite songs, the way she used to chase butterflies in the backyard. Each memory brought a flicker of light to his face, followed by the inevitable shadow of loss. Ethan listened intently, asking questions when appropriate, offering silent support when words weren't needed. By the end of it, Daniel looked less like a man weighed down by despair and more like someone beginning to find his footing again. Meanwhile, outside the diner, clouds gathered overhead, casting a grey hue over the town. The weather mirrored the emotional storm brewing inside Danielland, unbeknownst to him, within Ethan as well. As the afternoon wore on, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that his act of generosity had set something bigger in motion. Helping Daniel felt right, but it also stirred something deep within him, a yearning to make a difference, even if it meant sacrificing his own plans. Back at home, Ethan's mum, Sarah, greeted him with a warm hug when he returned. "How was your day, buddy?" she asked, ruffling his hair affectionately. Her smile faltered slightly when she noticed the absence of the money he'd been saving. "What happened to your savings? Did you spend it already?" Ethan hesitated, guilt gnawing at him. He hadn't planned to tell her, not because he was ashamed, but because he worried she might not understand. How do you explain giving away something so precious for someone you barely knew? Still, lying wasn't an option. Taking a deep breath, he recounted the events of the day, watching his mum's expression shift from confusion to pride. "Ethan," she said softly, pulling him into another embrace. "That was incredibly brave of you. I'm so proud of you." But as she held him close, her mind raced. Times were tough for their family. They relied on every penny Ethan earned to keep things afloat. His sacrifice, while noble, meant stretching their budget even thinner. Yet, looking into her son's earnest eyes, she knew she couldn't take that moment of selflessness away from him. Unbeknownst to either of them, Daniel had gone home that evening with a renewed sense of purpose. Sitting alone in his sprawling mansion, surrounded by luxury but devoid of joy, he replayed the encounter with Ethan over and over in his mind. The boy's innocence, his unwavering compassion, struck a chord deep within Daniel. For the first time in years, he felt inspired to take action, to honor Lily's memory in a way that truly mattered. Over the next few days, Daniel began making calls, reaching out to local charities and community organizations. He wanted to create something lasting, something that would help families facing hardships similar to those Ethan and his mum endured. But as he delved deeper into his plans, he realized he couldn't do it alone. He needed guidance, perspective, someone who understood hardship firsthand. His thoughts kept returning to Ethan. There was something about the boy's humility and courage that resonated with him. If anyone could help shape this project into something meaningful, it was Ethan. But approaching him again felt daunting. Would the boy agree to work alongside a stranger? And what would Sarah think about her son getting involved with someone like Daniel? The tension mounted as Daniel wrestled with these questions. Meanwhile, Ethan faced challenges of his own. Without the money he'd saved, he struggled to figure out how to still surprise his mum for her birthday. Determined not to let her down, he brainstormed ideas late into the night, sketching pictures and jotting down notes. One idea stood out: a handmade gift, something personal and heartfelt, but it required materials he didn't have. Frustrated but unwilling to give up, he decided to visit the local craft store the following day. Little did Ethan know, fate had other plans. As he stepped into the store, he nearly collided with none other than Daniel, who was browsing supplies for his charity initiative. Their eyes met, and for a split second, neither spoke. Then, breaking the silence, Daniel smiled faintly. "Ethan, right? Fancy meeting you here." Ethan nodded, startled but intrigued. "Mr. Daniel, what are you doing here?" "Just picking up a few things," Daniel replied, gesturing to the basket in his hand. "Actually, I was hoping I might run into you. There's something I'd like to discuss. If you have a moment." Ethan's curiosity piqued, and despite his initial shyness, he agreed to listen. What followed was a conversation that would alter the course of both their lives. Daniel shared his vision for the charity program designed to support struggling families through education, mentorship, and financial assistance. He explained how Ethan's act of kindness had sparked the idea and confessed that he wanted the boy's input to ensure it stayed grounded in reality. For Ethan, the proposal was overwhelming. Here was a millionaire asking him an advice. It was surreal, exhilarating, and terrifying all at once. Yet, as he listened to Daniel speak, he realized this was an opportunity to turn his small act of generosity into something much bigger, something that could help countless others. But agreeing to help came with its own set of complications. Balancing school, chores, and his responsibilities at home wouldn't be easy. Plus, there was the lingering question of whether Sarah would approve. Though she admired Ethan's intentions, she worried about the toll it might take on him emotionally. After all, helping strangers was one thing. Becoming deeply involved in their struggles was another. As the days turned into weeks, the partnership between Daniel and Ethan grew stronger. Together, they worked tirelessly, refining the charity's mission and spreading awareness throughout the community. Along the way, they forged an unlikely bond, each learning valuable lessons from the other. For Daniel, it was a chance to reconnect with humanity, to channel his grief into something positive. For Ethan, it was a lesson in perseverance, empathy, and the power of believing in oneself. Yet, just as things seemed to be falling into place, a new challenge arose, one that threatened to unravel everything they'd built. A major donor pulled out unexpectedly, leaving the project short on funds. Panic set in as Daniel scrambled to find a solution, but resources were dwindling fast. Desperate, he turned to Ethan, hoping the boy might have an idea. Ethan, however, was preoccupied with his own dilemma. His mum's birthday was only days away, and he still hadn't finished her gift. With no money left and limited supplies, he feared disappointing her. The weight of his responsibilities pressed down on him, leaving him torn between honoring his promise to Sarah and fulfilling his commitment to Daniel. And so, as the clock ticked closer to the charity's launch date, Sarah's birthday, the stakes grew higher. Both Ethan and Daniel faced choices that would test their resolve, their values, and their ability to trust each other. The climax loomed ahead, shrouded in uncertainty. Could they overcome these obstacles and see their dreams through, or would the pressures prove too great to bear? With each passing moment, the tension mounted, drawing viewers deeper into the story. Every decision carried consequences, every action rippled outward, affecting lives in ways neither character could fully anticipate. All that remained was to see how it would all unfold and whether kindness in the end could truly conquer adversity. As the charity's launch date approached, the pressure mounted. Daniel spent sleepless nights poring over spreadsheets and making frantic calls to potential donors, but every lead seemed to dry up before it could materialize. Meanwhile, Ethan wrestled with his own dilemma, how to create something meaningful for his mum without money or resources. The weight of both their responsibilities hung heavy in the air, threatening to crush them under its enormity. One evening, as Ethan sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by scraps of paper and half-finished sketches, an idea struck him, a simple yet powerful one. What if he used the story of his act of kindness to inspire others? He remembered how people had responded when they heard about what he'd done for Daniel. Maybe sharing that story publicly could rally support, not just for his mum's gift, but also for Daniel's struggling charity. Ethan shared his plan with Daniel the next day, his voice trembling with a mix of excitement and nerves. "What if we tell everyone why you started this charity?" he suggested. "You can talk about Lily and how much she meant to you, and I can share why I helped you that day. People might want to help us because they'll see how small acts of kindness can grow into something bigger." Daniel hesitated, his chest tightening at the thought of exposing his grief so openly. Talking about Lily still hurt more than words could express, but he couldn't deny the logic behind Ethan's idea. It was raw, vulnerably, exactly what the project needed to resonate with people. With a deep breath, he nodded. "All right, let's do it. But only if you're sure you're ready for this too." Together, they crafted a heartfelt video featuring Ethan recounting the moment he decided to pay for Daniel's lunch and Daniel speaking candidly about Lily and how her memory inspired the charity. They posted it online late one night, unsure of what kind of response to expect. By morning, the video had gone viral, flooding their inboxes with messages of support, donations pouring in from strangers across the country, and offers to volunteer. The sudden wave of generosity overwhelmed them both. For Daniel, it was validation that even in his darkest moments, there was still light to be found. For Ethan, it reinforced everything his mum had taught him about the power of compassion. Together, they worked tirelessly to finalize the charity's launch, fueled by the outpouring of love and encouragement from the community. But amidst all the chaos, Ethan hadn't forgotten about his mum's birthday. With the help of some neighbors who'd seen the video, he organized a surprise gathering at the diner where it all began. On the morning of her birthday, Sarah walked into the restaurant to find it filled with friends, family, and even a few familiar faces from town. At the center of it all stood Ethan, holding a handmade scrapbook filled with photos, notes, and mementos capturing their journey together. Tears streamed down Sarah's face as she flipped through the pages. Each entry told a story of laughter, resilience, and unconditional love. When she reached the final page, she froze. There, written in Ethan's careful handwriting, was a dedication, asterisk, to Mum, who taught me that kindness is the greatest gift of all. Asterisk. Across town, Daniel prepared for the official unveiling of the charity, now named Lily's Light. Hundreds gathered at the local community center, moved by the story of a grieving father and a compassionate boy who came together to make a difference. As Daniel addressed the crowd, his voice steady but thick with emotion, he acknowledged Ethan, standing beside him. "None of this would have been possible without this remarkable young man," he said, placing a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "He reminded me that even in our hardest moments, we have the power to bring light to others." In the weeks that followed, Lily's Light became a beacon of hope for families in need. Through scholarships, mentorship programs, and financial assistance, it transformed lives, including Ethan's. Inspired by the experience, he began volunteering regularly, using his newfound platform to encourage other kids to practice kindness in their communities. For Daniel, the charity gave him a renewed sense of purpose. Though the pain of losing Lily never fully faded, he found solace in knowing her legacy lived on through the countless lives touched by the organization. He and Ethan remained close, their bond stronger than ever, a testament to the extraordinary connection forged between two unlikely souls. As the months passed, Ethan reflected on everything that had happened. That single act of paying for Daniel's lunch had set off a chain reaction he never could have predicted. It wasn't about the money or the grand gestures, it was about seeing someone in need and choosing to care. In doing so, he'd sparked something far greater than himself. The story ended not with fireworks or fanfare, but with quiet moments of gratitude. One evening, as Ethan sat on the porch with his mum, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink, he turned to her with a thoughtful expression. "Do you think we really made a difference?" he asked softly. Sarah smiled, pulling him closer. "Oh, sweetheart, I know you did. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness create the biggest waves." And perhaps that was the true takeaway, not just for Ethan and Daniel, but for anyone who heard their story. Kindness isn't measured by its size, it's measured by its impact. Whether it's paying for a stranger's meal, lending a listening ear, or simply being present, every act has the potential to change lives, including your own. As the screen fades to black, viewers are left with a lingering sense of warmth and inspiration. The tale of an 8-year-old boy and a grieving millionaire serves as a reminder that even in a world often overshadowed by hardship, humanity's capacity for compassion remains boundless.